guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to today's video. I decided that it was finally time that I do a reading wrap up. We're going to be doing a wrap up from all the books I read from January until April. I just never got around to it, so I figured, you know what? I'm just going to do one for January through April, one for May through August, and one from September through through December. This is my first of 3 wrap ups for the year. Get ready because we got, I think, about 20-ish books to talk about. Yeah, we have 24 books to talk about. Let's dive in because that's a lot of books. So the first book I read was Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This one followed Anastasia and Nate. Anastasia was an ice figure skater and Nate's ice hockey player. And something happens to the hockey player's ice rink, so they end up having to share the rink with the figure skaters. And there's a lot of animosity there. You know, Anastasia's very dedicated to her figure skating, and she and Nate just bump heads a lot. But of course, they start developing a friendship, and we just get a kind of like a story from there. I think my first issue with it was that it was so long. Like, this is a pretty thick book. I think there's like, yeah, it's over 400 and almost like 30 pages. It's a pretty long book, and I don't think it needed to be as long as it was. It was also very spicy. So if you don't like spice in your books, this is not a closed door romance. This is very spicy, so definitely take that into consideration if you're going to pick this one up. There were points where I felt like the story was kind of just dragging on to get to the big twist, and I feel like the big twist in this was pretty obvious. Like, I don't think it was anything out of the blue. I feel like we were all expecting what happened to happen, so I feel like that was just a little underwhelming for me. I was expecting maybe just a little bit more given how thick this book was. I feel like we could have cut out 100 pages and it would have been better, but unfortunately it wasn't. But there were 2 characters in this that I absolutely loved, Henry and JJ. Their characters were just so great. I love their relationship with Anastasia. It was fun overall, and 3 stars. The next book I read was First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. I really ended up enjoying this one way more than I thought I was going to. I still struggle to kind of explain what this book is to people, so I definitely feel like this is one of those books that you kind of just have to go into, even though you might not know what it's about. It gives off Hitman by esque vibes, but it's not that. But that's what the description gave me off at first. But honestly, this turned out to be way more interesting than I thought it was going to be. This is like a thriller mystery kind of read, and it was honestly so much fun. We are following Evie Porter, who is given this assignment, but Evie Porter doesn't exist. And we kind of learn how she gets into the situation that she's in. And this book is honestly just like such a ride. The twists in this were really great. Evie Porter, she was so much fun. Like, she is such a fun character to read about. I really enjoyed this story. So if you're looking for like a mystery thriller that isn't super murder mystery, suspenseful, kind of crazy, but you're looking for something that's going to like give you twists and turns and keep you entertained, I think this is a really good one. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The next book I ended up reading was Gray After Dark by Noelle Ihili. This book was terrifying in the sense that it felt so real. Like, there are thrillers and mysteries that you'll read and you think, oh, that's so far-fetched, that would never happen. This one was not that. This one was like, holy crap, this could happen to absolutely anyone that finds himself in the wilderness. It was crazy. So this one's following Miley, who was an Olympic medalist, but she ends up getting injured, and she decides that she's going to work at this camp over the summer to kind of like recover. And during one of her runs in the wilderness, she ends up getting abducted and stuff happens. And this book is honestly twisty. It's crazy. It's very descriptive. I could still remember scenes that I felt like I could smell the things she was describing, like feel the things she was describing. Like, it's very descriptive. Noelle Ihili's writing is very, very good at that. This was a 4-star for me. I definitely recommend this. This one is a very different thriller mystery that will literally make you feel like you never want to go into the wilderness again. This one was really good. The next book I read was Hello Stranger by Catherine Center. This is like a cutesy little romance. I know a lot of people didn't really like this, but I thought this one was still pretty good given how very predictable I felt like this was. So we are following Sadie, who ends up getting into this accident and developing face blindness. So she doesn't recognize absolutely anybody. The only thing I think she recognizes is her dog, which was like so cute because that was like one of her main concerns was like, am I going to be able to recognize my dog? But she ends up developing face blindness, and we kind of see her navigating that throughout the story. And of course, there's like a love interest and stuff like that. And I feel like this was just very predictable, like how this was all going to come together at the end. The events that take place in the beginning, and you know, we see how everything just like plays out. But I think this was just cutesy. It was fun. With Catherine Center books, you always get a little bit of like more serious topics, so we do get a little bit of that in this as well. But overall, I think this was cute, quick, fun little romance. It's not super long, and I enjoyed it. So I gave this like a 3.5 star. The next book I ended up picking up was Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This was a very highly anticipated read for me, especially in the beginning of the year. I think it was a big anticipated read for everybody. I know there are still people to this day that are recovering from it. So this one was honestly really good. It is the third book in the Empyrean series. So the first one was Fourth Wing, and then it was Iron Flame, and now it's Onyx Storm. And there's going to be another one. So this one was honestly really good. I really enjoyed it. It's just a continuation of the story. We're finding out more information. I do think it felt less filler-like compared to Iron Flame. I definitely think Iron Flame felt like a filler book in between like Fourth Wing and this one. These books are very long. They're very long. And to know that we're still expecting more is just kind of like, I want to already know how the series is going to wrap up. But this is a really fun fantasy world to be in. So I really enjoy the series so far. And I'm excited for the next book whenever that is going to be released. Because I don't think we know when it's coming out. So we will see, but so far, I rated this one 4 stars. It's feeling like filler books, and granted, we learn a lot of information in this one, but I don't know, it just feels too fillery. But anyway, this was 4 stars. The next book I ended up picking up was A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. This one I was really excited for because her other 2 books I have absolutely loved. The Dead Romantics and The 7-Year Slip are some of my favorite books. So I was super excited for this one, and the concept of this one sounded like it was going to be so much fun. So we are following Eileen in this, who is a literature professor who ends up finding herself in the setting of one of her favorite romance novels, and it's given small town vibes with a cutesy little romance with a guy who works in a bookstore. Like, this was giving, but I feel like it was lacking a little bit, especially in the detail when it came to the romance. I feel like the romance was just lacking a little bit, especially at the end. I did not like the ending. But overall, this is a cutesy little vibe. You're getting the small town romance. You're getting that whole seeing how it is to be in a romance book that you love and seeing the after effects. Like, it's like you know all these characters, but it's not the story you know. It's a different story, and that was just fun. So I think the idea and the concept of this was really fun, but yeah, I just feel like it was not as flushed out as I wanted it to be. So this ended up being a 3-star for me, but I like Ashley Poston's writing. I still do think that the story was engaging, but it just fell a little flat for me in some parts. The next book I read was Misery by Stephen King. I was really excited because this was going to be my first Stephen King novel, and I've heard so many great things about this book, the movie adaptation of it. Like, I've heard such great things about this, and it's also not that long. Stephen King books are really long, so I was actually really excited that it wasn't going to be that long, but I have to say this felt really flat for me. So this story follows Annie and Paul. Paul ends up getting into this accident, and Annie ends up finding him, taking him back to her place, and kind of like nursing him. He's like seriously injured, like pretty badly. He cannot walk, cannot move, and he's a famous like author who wrote like this very popular romance series called Misery. It turns out Annie's his #1 fan. Like, she absolutely loves his Misery series. His most recent release is actually killing Misery off because he wanted to be done with that series. He didn't want to write it anymore. Annie finds out, and she's not happy about it. So she's like, you're going to redo this. You are going to write this story again for me, and you're going to make it right. And that's kind of the storyline we're following here. And I have to say, given how much I've heard about Stephen King and his writing, I felt like there was maybe 2 or 3 scenes that I actually really feel gave off horror vibes. And the rest of this was just very boring in Paul's head about the story that I just didn't really care about. I didn't really care about Paul's situation, even though it was a pretty crappy situation. I didn't really care about the story that he was writing. There was so much I did not care about that I literally kept pushing through because I kept hoping that something crazy was going to happen, and nothing crazy really happens. Like, not saying that things don't happen, because that sounds like really, I'm making it sound like nothing happens at all. There are things that happen, but nothing that felt, wow, I get it. This is crazy, top-notch horror. Nothing like that. It read more like a slow burn thriller to me than it did a horror. And I was expecting to go into this being very scared, on the edge of my seat, biting my nails, like super suspenseful, scary. Like, and this wasn't it. And that could just be me on my part. I guess I was expecting more, given that Stephen King is known for his horror. But yeah, this just fell flat for me. This was a 2-star. I just didn't really like this. The next book I ended up reading was Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This one turned out to be way more enjoyable than I actually thought it was going to be. I ended up picking this one up because a friend of mine chose it for our book club. So I was like, okay, let's give it a go. I've seen a lot of people talk about this book, but I really had no interest in picking it up. And I'm kind of glad I did, because I actually really enjoyed this more than I thought I would. There's like a mystery going on in this that I was not expecting, and I think that mystery element definitely hooked me and made me want to know how this was all going to wrap up. So we are following Signa, who was orphaned as a baby. She jumps from guardian to guardian because all of her guardians keep mysteriously dying. So she ends up finding her last relatives, the Hawthorns, that end up taking her in. And the Hawthorns are related to her because she is relation to the mother, but the mother of this family did pass away, and the daughter is also kind of sick. So when she moves in with this family, the mother's spirit actually appears to her, claiming that she was poisoned, and is causing concern for the daughter that's sick now, because she is experiencing the same things that the mother was experiencing before she passed away. So Signa now has to solve this mystery of what happened to the mother and who poisoned her, and who's now poisoning the daughter that's sick. So she's very much trying to protect the family that she has left, because this is her only family and she doesn't want anything to jeopardize that. So this was really fun. I hope that made sense. I had a really hard time describing this book, but this one was so much fun. The mystery element, the twists in this, her relationship with death, as we learn in this story, is really interesting. And yeah, this was really good. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. This was a lot of fun, and I think I do want to continue the series because this ends on a cliffhanger, and I'm kind of still thinking about it, and I kind of want to know what's going to happen. So the next book we have was my first 5-star of the year, Beg, Borrow, Steal by Sarah Adams. I absolutely loved this book so much. This is definitely a rivals, enemies to lovers, the banter, this was just so good. We are following Emily and Jack. Emily and Jack are both 2nd grade teachers, and they just have this rivalry. They both hate each other. They have this back and forth banter of insults, and it's just such a great vibe. So Jack ends up moving away because he's supposed to get married, but he ends up moving back because the wedding got called off. But not only does he move back to the small town of Rome, he moves right next door to Emily. Emily tries everything to get him to kind of just leave. She tries to turn the town against him. She tries to essentially just playing games with him to just kind of make him want to leave. But nothing she does obviously does anything. And this book was just so much fun. I cannot express how much I enjoyed this. Sarah Adams' writing is just, you're going to get a really sweet romance, but this just hit so different. Her When in Rome series is honestly one of my favorites. I definitely like it more than her, I forget the sports romance ones that she has. I know one of them's called The Cheat Sheet, but this series hits so much better, and this one is my favorite so far. I absolutely love this, and I highly recommend. 5 stars. The next book I read was The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. I am not even going to try to describe this book to you guys because I don't even really know that I can fully tell you what this book is about, but the vibes of this were a lot of fun. We are in Russia, in the wilderness. The vibe and the setting of this is very cold, very, very Russia. We are following a family in this, and one specific person, Vasilisa, I think I'm saying her name right. I think it's Vasilisa, but we are following her and her journey from a little kid to growing up, and her experience with these gifts that she kind of has. I'm telling you, I'm struggling to try and describe what this is about, but I really enjoyed this. The setting of it was really great. The stories, because we do get glimpses of the story throughout this, and it just felt like literally being read a fairy tale. A lot of people describe this as very similar to like giving them like Beauty and the Beast vibes. If you've heard that, do not go into this thinking it's going to be Beauty and the Beast vibes, because it's not. There's no Beauty and the Beast in this. But overall, I thought this was fine. I gave this a 3.5 star. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the setting and the stories that we got in this. It was very interesting to read. It was a little slow at times. It definitely reads like a fairy tale. So I enjoyed this. It is a part of a series. I do think there's 2 other books in it. I don't know that I do want to continue the series though. I'm not sure about that, but I did enjoy this for the most part. The next book I read was Secrets in the Dark by Darcy Coates. This is the second book in her Black Winter series. Her first one is Voices in the Snow, and this is the second book in that series. Just because this is the second book, I don't want to give too much away, but honestly, I am so enjoying this series. It's very apocalyptic. It gets creepy at times, but it's not so scary. So if you're not into super scary stories, this is actually a pretty good one to pick up, because it's not super scary so much as it is like end of the world, apocalypse, what is going to happen, what's causing the end of the world, and like kind of situation. So I definitely recommend the series. This one was a 4-star for me, and I can't wait to finish this because so far the series is really good. The next book I picked up was The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. This one was a book that had been on my TBR for a while, and I finally picked it up, and I actually enjoyed this. It wasn't like super scary or anything like that. It is giving like haunted, closed down school kind of vibes, but it's not super supernatural or like scary or anything like that. This one, we are following 2 different timelines. The first timeline is Vermont back in the 50s when this school called Idlewild Hall was open, and this was a school for like girls who were troubled. So like either they were illegitimate or they have behavioral issues or something like that. They got sent to this school to kind of like go to boarding school, you're not my problem anymore kind of situation. And the other timeline we're following is more present day Vermont, where we're following Fiona, who her sister was actually killed 25 years ago at that school, but not as a student. She was just killed and her body was found at the school, but it wasn't that she went to the school. So there's just like a connection there that we're trying to figure out, and we learn a lot about what happened in the 50s and why the school closed down and what happens to her sister and all of that. So this one was actually really fun. I did like the timelines, and I did overall enjoy the twists. This one definitely kept me on my toes, guessing to see if I was going to be able to figure it out. So I did enjoy this for the most part. I ended up giving this a 3.75. It definitely was way better than I thought it was going to be, but I kind of do wish it was a little spookier. That's where it fell a little flat for me. But yeah, 3.75. This was fun. The next book I ended up picking up was The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This one was highly anticipated because I had heard so many great things about the storyline, and this read more fictiony than I was anticipating given like the premise of it. It sounded like it was going to be more thriller mystery, but it actually read more fiction, which I don't mind. But I feel like this one first was really long. There were a lot of POVs, and I usually don't mind POVs because in The Broken Girls by Simone St. James, that one, in the past timeline, we were filtering through like different POVs. So I don't typically mind multiple POVs, but there were some POVs in here that just felt unnecessary. And it didn't really add anything to the story overall. Like, you literally could have taken them out, and I feel like the story would have read exactly the same. That was one issue I had with it, and I feel like because those added POVs were in there, it made the story longer for no reason. So that kind of took it away from me. So this essentially takes place at a summer camp where the owners of the summer camp, their daughter wants to go to the summer camp. They end up letting her go, and she ends up going missing. But the reason why her going missing is a big thing is because her brother, many years ago, also went missing, and nobody knew what happened to him. So this story is essentially following what happened to Barbara, who went missing, and what happened to her brother, who also went missing like many moons ago. This sounded like it was going to be really good. I just feel like, yeah, I don't know, somewhere I got lost in this. There was so much detail in this that it just felt, I was trying to keep up with all the details that we were getting, that I was losing the overall anticipation for the story itself. It's very slow burn, which I don't typically mind. I've had some thrillers that some are my favorites that are slow burn, so that I didn't really mind that. But This just felt slow burn to build suspense that just was so underwhelming. The writing style was a bit different because you're reading a chapter based on someone's POV in like a certain setting, and there were paragraphs that would take place in one location, and then the next paragraph you're in a completely different place, in a completely different setting, and you're just like, wait, how did we get here? So I felt like sometimes her writing would just like jump around. So this was about a 3.5 star for me. The next book I picked up was The Fall Risk by Abby Jimenez. This one was another book club book pick, so it was a shorter one. It's her novella that recently came out for Valentine's Day, I think. And this one was cute. I feel like this specific novella would have done better as a full-fledged novel rather than a short story, mainly because one of the main characters is dealing with a stalker, and I feel like what happens in the story felt very unrealistic because there wasn't enough time to develop the character's growth, I guess. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm just going to leave it there. It's probably very vague. Overall, this was still really good. And Abby Jimenez's writing is just great, and even in a short story, it was still really great. So we are following Charlotte and Seth, who live in this apartment building, their neighbors, and one day they wake up and their stairs are gone. And they're just like, what the heck happened? So they're working with the owner or the landlord to figure out their stairs situation. But because their stairs are gone, they're literally confined. So they end up building like a little relationship and getting to know each other and stuff like that. And that's kind of like the premise of the story. Yeah, this one was, like I said, it's a super fast. I think it's like 75 pages. Like, it's a super quick read. I did still enjoy while I was reading it, so I do recommend you read it if it sounds interesting, because it was still really fun to read. But yeah, this was a 3-star. The next book I read was This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. This is the second book in the Skyland series. The first book is Before I Let Go, and then it's This Could Be Us, and then the third book that's coming out this month, I'm so excited, is Can't Get Enough. So we are following Soledad in this one, and she's recently divorced from her husband. There's something that happens, and she ends up getting divorced from her husband, and she's embracing this new single life with her children. She's so used to always being in a relationship because she's known her husband since forever. So she's definitely taking this period to really become, be comfortable with loving herself. And her transition from, married life to being like now single, stay-at-home mom is very jarring for her. So she's, really taking the time to learn how to support her family. Judah actually worked with her husband. They worked for the same company. So he has been around since kind of like the beginning of the story when the situation happens with her husband. So he's always kind of been there supporting her. We see the connection from Judah and Soledad pretty quickly. And I think for that, it kind of felt almost insta-lovey, which, as we know, I don't love insta-love. And I feel like this one, the insta-lovey in this one, I did not love, because given Soledad's story of her getting over this divorce and finding connection with herself and her children and really embracing that self-love, and then having this guy in the background just kind of, I don't know, it just like didn't click very well with me. But I still overall enjoyed this story. Reading about Soledad's journey was just like so great. Seeing the friend group, seeing her children's growth, like everything about this was still really good. This was 4 stars for me. But I kind of do wish that the love interest in this didn't feel too insta-lovey, given that the whole point of this story was to embrace Soledad, really finding herself and finding her own love for herself. And having the interest there just felt really off to me. I hope that makes sense. But I still really did enjoy this, and I cannot wait to finish the series with Hendrix's story. Hendrix is one of my favorite characters in this series, and I'm so excited for that story. But yeah, this one was 4 stars. The next book I picked up was Guild by Raven Kennedy. We talked about this. This book was on my TBR for far too long. I ended up picking it up, and this was 2 stars. Let me just put it to you that way. This was 2 stars. I still can't really even describe this book, because I don't even know what I was reading. This is a King Midas kind of like adaptation. We're following Arin, who is the king's favored. She is gold touched. He, like, literally everything about her is gold, except for, like, I think she said her eyes. They're not gold or whatever, and her teeth. I think she said her eyes and her teeth are the only things not gold, but she's literally gold touched. She is the king's favored. And I just feel like this first book had absolutely no real reason to, like, there was no plot, in my opinion, in this first book. I feel like the story was just written to be written with no actual point. There was like a war that was mentioned. Apparently that this has like 7 kingdoms or something like that. And there's just like there's like a power system in this. Like King Midas can, like produce gold. Like if you touch something, it becomes gold. There are other kings and other people who have powers very similar to this. But they talk about, they don't even talk about that. I don't even know how that happens. Like, it's just, I don't know. The magic system in this was just not really described. There's not a whole lot of world building in this. Like, I really don't know much about this world aside from some people have magic, some people don't. And there's like 7 kingdoms or 6 kingdoms or something like that. I really don't remember. And that's it. So, honestly, this was 2 stars. I can't even give you guys a review on this because I literally don't know what I read. But people have said that this book doesn't count, that I should continue the series and read the second book because the series actually gets so much better than this. So I did buy the second book. I did. And I'm going to probably read it. I don't know when, but I'm probably going to read it. And we'll see what happens. But this was 2 stars. This was a no for me, babe. Because this was just bad. And that's it. The next book I ended up picking up was Animal Farm by George Orwell. I've heard so many great things about this book. Curiosity definitely got the best of me. It's so short. So I was able to read this in like, I kid you not, maybe a day. And this was honestly really interesting. So we're following a bunch of animals on this farm who decide they don't like how they're being treated by the people that work on the farm. So they end up revolting against the people and they end up starting their own little government. They're like, we're gonna take care of ourselves. We are going to establish our own situation. And it gets very convoluted after that. But honestly, this was really fun and interesting to read. It definitely, there's a lot of connections to like what we see in governmental systems, how things start and are established. And this is honestly just, it's satire, so it's meant to be funny. It was a lot of fun, and if you're interested in reading this, I highly do recommend you pick it up because this was very interesting to read. And I think I gave this 4 stars. The next book I picked up was Wild Side by Elsie Silver. This is the 3rd book in the Rose Hill series and probably my least favorite so far. I think I settled on a 3.5 star for this one. This one fell flat for me, and I think it's because this story this was really long. It was really long, and I feel like a lot of what we read in this story, we already saw glimpses of in like other books, because we do see these 2 characters in the other 2 books. One, the miscommunication in this was aggravating, where it was just like, why can't you guys just talk to each other? Like, why can't you just clear things up? Because literally the first 50% of this book would have not occurred had y'all just talked to each other. And then we're entered into this marriage of like, I don't even know if it's convenience, but essentially we are following Reese and Tabitha, who are both connected because of her sister who recently passes away, which we already know given the other 2 stories. Her sister had a son and his name is Milo, and currently Reese has custody over Milo. So in order to kind of like figure out their situation, they end up deciding to get married so that way she can have custody over Milo. And I feel like we very much lose Milo in this story. I feel like what I really liked about the other 2 books was the children in the story, especially in the second book. The kids were just so much fun to read about, and like they played such a big part in the story. This one, I feel like Milo was just like fleeting. Like we would get certain scenes with him, but like this was mainly on the romance, and the romance was mainly just miscommunication the entire time. This one fell a little flat for me. Especially, Reese's profession. He was like a professional wrestler, and no, this man was not attractive to me at all. So this was like a 3.5 star. Still love Elsie Silver's writing, but this one was definitely not my favorite. The next book I picked up was Nothing Ever Happens Here by Serafina Nova Glass. This is a thriller mystery set in like a small town, which I love small town vibes, so this sounded really interesting to me. We're following Shelby, who very early on in the story ends up having something super tragic happen to her. At the same time, there is Mac, her husband, disappears at the same time as Shelby's attack. So people are like, there's a connection. They think he might have had something to do with it, but there's no answers because we can't find him. So flash forward a year and a half later, we're following the aftermath of that. Shelby's attacker is back. And now Shelby's like, I need to figure out who this is, what happened, because they're back now. We also get another POV from, there's this group of senior citizens in this that start a podcast because they want to solve the case and figure out what happened to Shelby. And that was honestly my favorite part of this entire book. The senior citizens were such a treat. Reading from their POV was just so much fun. I absolutely love them. And I feel like they're the reason why this book was a 3.5 star for me. Because Mac and Shelby's POVs lacked personality. I feel like they were very interchangeable. Like, had I not known whose POV I was reading in, I would not have known they were different POVs. I feel like their characters were just not really developed. The ending of this was also pretty freaking crazy. And I will say I did not guess the twist. So everything was pretty interesting about this. It's very slowishy burn. Like, it starts off like boom, and then it gets very slow burn. Overall, this was okay. I gave it a 3.5 star, mainly because the senior citizens were just a treat. The next book I picked up was Rebel Witch by Kristen Ciccarelli. This is the second book in the Crimson Moth series. This was honestly just so much fun. I absolutely love this series. I love the cat and mouse game. I love the scenery that we get in this. It's just so vibey, and this was just so much fun. We are following Rune and Gideon, and as I said, this is the sequel, so I'm not going to give too much detail, but essentially we are following Rune and Gideon. Rune is a witch, and Gideon is a witch hunter. We definitely get a lot of answers in this one, and I feel like this one was pretty predictable at how it was going to end. I still had such a great time, though. This was 4 stars. This series does end with this book, so honestly, I feel like this one really wrapped up everything well, and this series I do highly recommend because it is only a duology, and it's so much fun. Who doesn't love a witch hunter and a witch? It was great. The next book I picked up was Promise Me Sunshine by Cara Bastone. I was so excited for this one because I read Ready or Not by this author, and I absolutely loved it more than I thought I was, and this one did not disappoint. This one was a 4.25 for me. I really loved the buildup of the relationship we get in this. It's not insta-lovey. We see them become friends before they become lovers. This book does follow hard topics. The main character, Lenny, her best friend passes away from cancer, and she's going through grief in like a very hard way. Our second character, Miles, comes into play because Lenny takes on a babysitting gig, and the person that Lenny is babysitting for, Miles, is their sibling. So Miles ends up helping Lenny get through her grief because he also went through something similar. So he ends up helping her, not get over her grief, but he helps her through this period that's very hard for her. I feel like this story did such a great job at portraying grief, and just Lenny and Miles' relationship as we see develop in the story was just like so great. Miles is just such a great character, and you see how even he himself is going through his own stuff, and this book was so good. I highly, highly, highly recommend this. Obviously, like I said, this book does talk about grief, so if that's triggering for you, just know that, but this was really good. The next book I picked up was The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. I wanted something fast-paced and twisty, and Frida always delivers in that department. This one is a dual POV story, so we are getting the current timeline with Sydney and then a past timeline. Sydney is essentially on these dating apps. She's trying to find, her love interest. One of her friends ends up getting murdered, and they're not sure who did it, but they think it might have been one of the guys that she was dating through one of these apps. So she's obviously scared now because she's over here dating through these apps, and one of her best friends ends up getting murdered by somebody that she met through on this app. So this one definitely is like, hey, if you're single and you're online dating, like, you probably shouldn't be. Like, this was just a big red flag for online dating. This story was honestly so crazy. I thought I had it figured out. Like, I was like, yes, I already solved this case. Like, let's go. Oh no, babe. This took a twist that I was like, when I figured it out, I was like, of course I should have thought of that. I can't believe I didn't. And it's fine. But this one honestly was so twisty. I will say in the past POV, I kept getting a sense of deja vu. like I had read it before. And I'm not sure if it's because I also read Frida's book called The Perfect Son, and that one's also following a kid in high school. So I don't know if it's just because those two gave off a similar vibe. Overall, I gave this 3 stars. It did what I wanted it to do. It was a twisty thriller that I read in like maybe 2 days. The next book I read was my highly anticipated read for April, Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez, and also my second 5-star of the year. This was so good. This was insta-lovey. Don't get me wrong. I know I did just say I don't like insta-lovey like a couple books back. Insta-lovey, which as we know, I don't love insta-love, but Abby Jimenez did it right with this one. I don't know what the heck she put into this, but this is how you do insta-love, okay? This book follows Xavier and Samantha. Xavier is a veterinarian, and Samantha ends up finding this little cat. She takes into the vet to kind of get checked up because this is her cat. Xavier's like, oh, your cat is not going to survive because your cat doesn't have a butthole. And she was like, well, can't I fix it? And he was like, yeah, if you have like thousands of dollars in a surgery. And she was like, well, I don't have thousands of dollars. So he was like, you need to put the cat down then. She was like, I'm not putting this cat down. And he was like, well, there's no way you're going to save this cat's life if you don't get the surgery that may or may not work. So Samantha, to prove him wrong, ends up doing a GoFundMe to raise funds for the surgery for this cat and prove that there is some good in humanity, whereas Xavier's like, no one's gonna help you. Of course, she's able to raise this money. She goes back into the vet and is like, hey, look at my cat. Look at my cat's butthole. He ends up asking her out, and of course, she's like, yes, I'll go out with you. They go on this amazing first date. She's getting ready to leave for her flight to California, and it turns out she's actually moving. And he was like, I thought you were just going on a trip. She was like, oh no, I'm leaving. I need to go back to California and be with my mom. And her mom is going through like a health issue, so she's going back to California to be with her mom to help take care of her mom. Of course, he's like, we just had this one amazing date and now you're leaving. They think that that's it, but of course it's not it. They end up getting into this long distance relationship, and of course, as every long distance relationship goes through, there's lots of issues that come up and stuff like that. But this story is honestly just like so great. Definitely check out the content warning that's in the beginning of this. She just kind of talk about what this book is going to get into because there are some tough topics in this, but I know a lot of people didn't like this, but for me, I truly love this and I highly recommend. This book was so much fun. The romance was great and this was just great. The last book I read in April was Morning Star by Pierce Brown. This is the 3rd book in the Red Rising series. I know there are other books in this like Red Rising saga, but I don't know if this is the last one from the initial like trilogy and then there's just expansions, or if they just continue. But I will say the way this one wraps up at the end, I do think that it's meant to be like a trilogy with like extensions. I don't know though. But I did enjoy this for the most part. I do think it wrapped up the series really well. I'm not really going to say too much about this because like I said, it is the 3rd book in this series, so I don't want to give anything away, but I do think that this wrapped up things very nicely. The emotions you go through in this is just kind of crazy. Overall, the series is just really dense. There are lots of characters, lots of things you have to remember. If you're going to read the Red Rising series, I highly recommend you read them back to back rather than spacing them out. I do think that because I would put months in between each book, there's a lot of details that I would forget that I would have to kind of like re-remember. That was a little unfortunate for me, just like as like my overall experience reading it. I kind of wish I would have read them closer together. But overall, the series was really interesting. It's very sci-fi-esque. Overall, this one was a 4-star. I do think I enjoyed this one more than the 2nd book in the series. But yeah, this one was really good. And those are all the books that I read from January until April. 24 books, and honestly, I really think I've been having a pretty good reading year, and I've already had 2 5-star reads, which is very promising because I don't even think last year I had a 5-star read until like almost the end of the year. So 2 5-star reads in the first 4 months of the year is pretty good, if I might say so. But I would love to know if you've read any of the books that I've talked about today and what your thoughts were, especially on my 5-star reads. I love to know what people think about the 5-star reads that I've had. So if you also rated Beg, Borrow, Steal or Abby Jimenez's Say You'll Remember Me 5 stars, I would love to know what your thoughts were on those because I absolutely love those books. But I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, I would love it if you would like, comment, subscribe, All my links are down below if you want to follow me on Instagram or TikTok. I do post there too. But that's it for today's video. I do hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.